What's going on, everybody? It's ETA Prime back here again. Today we're going to be taking a look at the fastest Ryzen powered single board computer we've ever had here on the channel. Now, yesterday, at the time of making this video, I did a video on this little mini PC. It's powered by a Ryzen 7 7840U. It's made by ASRock. It's known as the 4x4 7840U. Over on their website, they also have a single board computer section, and they recently listed the 7840U variant. So that's what we're going to be taking a look at in this video. And I'm going to tell you right now, since we don't have a case with this unit here, I'm actually able to get a little more power out of it because I can up the TDP without it thermal throttling. In this video, we've got a lot to test, but before we get into it, I do want to mention that this video is brought to you by URCD keys. I've actually been using this site for a couple years now. They do offer Steam keys, Origin, Uplay. They even offer Microsoft applications like Office, but the main reason that I use URCD keys is for their Windows keys. Right now, their Windows 10 Pro OEM key is $19.84, but if you use code ETA at checkout, you can get 25% off. And another great thing about buying from here is they do accept PayPal. I just did this build here. I need to activate Windows. I'm going to head over to my updates and security. We're going to go to activation. As you can see, I've got Windows 10 Pro, but it's not activated. So I'm going to change product key. I'm going to paste it in here, choose next, choose activate, and Windows is now activated. We're ready to go. My warning is totally gone, and basically that's it. They'll email your code once your payment is processed, and that's basically it. If you're interested in picking up cheap Windows 10 keys for your new PC builds, I'll leave a link in the description. Getting right back to the 7840U powered SBC. Now on their website, it does state that these are single board computers, but we have to add RAM and storage to this. Either way, it's still a super small form factor unit, and it's got so much power, it's actually ridiculous. We're going to take a look at some gaming and emulation on this board. Heading over to the ASRock Industrial website under their single board computer section, you can see they've got the NUC and the 4x4. The 4x4 is the one we're looking at here, and they've got several to choose from. 7840U, that's the one we're going to be testing out, but they also make the 7640U. I want to get my hands on this one. Now, buying it directly from the website is almost impossible if you're not a company, but you could do a search on eBay. Last year, when I was looking for the older versions, like the 5800U, they did pop up over there, but the 7840U is the one we've got our hands on right now. And this thing is putting out some amazing performance. Like I mentioned, I was able to up the TDP much higher on this because we don't have to worry about, enclosed inside of a case. Instead of a 45 watt TDP with the 4x4 boxed version, I could take this up to 70 watts on a 7840U. And this will allow us to get those maximum clocks on the CPU and GPU at the same time. Basically, I just want to see how far we can push this chipset. Okay, so with the industrial versions, obviously we don't have a case, but it does come with a cooler. Not much else is going on here, so I did want to kind of stand this up off of the table, and usually when I mess around with these industrial SBCs, I just use some of these plastic standoffs. I bought a kit on Amazon a while ago, and they come in really handy. You could go horizontal with it, but I'm going to go vertical with it. So basically, I've just put two standoffs on the bottom, kind of acting as feet, and now we need to install our RAM and storage. Since this is using a Ryzen 7000 series APU, Zen 4 cores, RDNA3 graphics, we do need DDR5. This supports up to 5600 MHz, 64 gigs, and I'm going to go with 32 gigs dual channel here at 5600 MHz. And for storage, I'm going with a PCIe 4.0 NVMe SSD. It's a 2TB Aorus 7000S series SSD. These things are really fast, and it should work out just fine for this little system. And here it is, all finished up. We've got our 32 gigabytes of RAM, our 2TB M.2 SSD. We should be able to go ahead and boot this thing up. Now on the front, we do have two USB 4 ports. This will support single cable operation mode, but at the kind of wattage that I'm running at, I do need a monitor that'll support 100 watt PD charging out, and I've only got 65. So I'm going to use a power supply. And by the way, this will work on 12 or 19 volts. But before we get into it, I did want to give you a quick size comparison here. I've got a couple other single board computers, like the Latte Panda, the Odroid N2, Raspberry Pi 4, and Raspberry Pi 5. It's really not much bigger than the N2 itself. It's definitely going to sit up taller because we need a pretty massive cooler for this 7840U. But when it comes down to it, for the performance this thing's putting out, it's a very small form factor. Alright, so here we are. I am using a 120 watt 19 volt power adapter for this. You can use this in single cable operation mode, and what that would do is basically you just need a single USB Type-C cable plugged into one of the USB 4 ports. That way you could send power and video to your monitor, but this monitor only does 65 watts, so we're going to be pulling a lot more than that. Now, we've seen the 7840U in a lot of handhelds, but most of them kind of max out at that 50 watt TDP range. I was actually surprised that I was able to get this over 50 watts. We're up to 70 watts, and I'll give you a look real quick. I'm using Core Temp and CPU-Z just to stress it out. And once I put a load on all 8 cores, you can see this jump right up. 70, 71 watts, and it'll hold steady there. Now, of course, if I let this run for a very long period of time, we can hit thermal throttle, but these chips are actually made to run it up to around 95 degrees Celsius, and we're not going to hit that while we're gaming, even at this kind of TDP. These chips perform absolutely amazing for 4K video playback. This is a 4K monitor. I'm doing a 4K 60 FPS HDR video. I know it's a bit hard to see stats for nerds up in the top left-hand corner, but this ran all the way through with only 2 drop frames, and those 2 drop frames were basically at the initial load-in. And even though we've got the TDP jacked all the way up on this, for 4K 60 playback, this is only drawing around 18 watts. And as you can see, out of those 4600 frames, we only had 2 drop by the end. When it comes to gaming on this chipset, we've got a few different technologies that really help us out, but brand new to all of this is HYPR-RX. Basically, what this does is leverage all of these different technologies like Radeon Super Resolution, Radeon Anti-Lag Plus, Radeon Chill, and I've noticed that it does help out with some games, but I've also gotten lower frame rates with some others. One that really does work with this is Cyberpunk 2077, so I'm going to have this enabled with the game, and we're going to move over there now. Okay, so here it is. If you take a look at Afterburner, you can see that we're right there at 70 watts with this chipset. I do have HYPR-RX enabled. We're at low settings, 1080p with Cyberpunk 2077, and I can get an average of around 78 FPS. And I'm using the low preset. Usually when I do my testing here, we go through and turn everything to low because that low preset actually has a few things set to medium. And with HYPR-RX, we can see about the same kind of performance there. But yeah, I mean, it does work. Next up, Forza Horizon. This is one of those games that I cannot wait for some more optimizations to drivers and the game itself. I got a feeling that we will be able to run this at 60 FPS, low 1080p, but right now we're at 1080p medium with FSR set to balanced. We can hardly break 40 FPS on this, and I usually recommend just running this at 1080p medium settings, 30 FPS. Still feels good, and if you're into this kind of game, you can definitely play it, but it would be nice to run this at 60 on this chipset. I also tested out Assassin's Creed Mirage. We're using the built-in benchmark, medium settings, 1080p, and by the end of this, we had an average of 56 FPS. Spiderman Remastered and Spider-Man Morales have definitely come a long way when it comes to driver optimizations. We can now run this at a constant 60 FPS. Now, every once in a while, we get a couple dips here and there. You'll see it dip down to around 59, but if that frame counter wasn't on, I'd never notice it. Unfortunately, we're at low settings, 1080p. Would be really nice to take this up to medium, but it's still really playable at 1080 low. With Forza Horizon 5, I was really hoping we could hit 120 FPS with this game at medium 1080. Now at 720 low, we can do 120 all day long, but even with FSR set to performance, we can't hit 120, and we don't need FSR with this. We can go to 1080, medium, no resolution scale, and have a good time with this game. But the way I have it set up right now, we're getting an average of around 94 FPS. And finally, for the PC gaming side of things, we've got Starfield. Low settings, 1080p, with FSR as low as it can go. We're basically at 50% resolution scale. And planet side, or even indoors, it does a pretty good job. I got an average of 51 FPS, but as soon as you move into a city, you're only going to get an average of around 36. Taking it down to 720 really doesn't help out that much because we're already kind of scaling with FSR really low already. And I figured I'd go ahead and throw some emulation in here. First up, we've got some PS2, God of War 2, we're at 1440p. I'm using the Vulkan backend, PCSX2, running at a constant 60. Now I knew we'd be able to do PS2 really well on this system, so let's move over to Xbox 360. And with a harder to emulate game like Red Dead Redemption, 60 FPS is out of the question. But at 30, it's not that bad, and one thing I usually always do is kind of lock a static GPU clock, but I decided not to just to see what would happen. and you'll see we get some dips under 30 here and there, but it's not bad at all. And finally, we've got some PS3 using RPCS3. Here's Skate 3 running at 60. This is some really good performance, and we are at 720p. We could probably take it up to 1080 with a game like this now that we've got, much more powerful Zen 4 cores with this chip. And if you were interested in GameCube or Wii, even Wii U, this is more than enough power. Even Switch emulation runs at full speed on this chipset. Personally, really impressed with the performance this thing's putting out, and given the fact that we can take the TDP up on this so high is really awesome, but not a lot of people need to go up that high. Even at 45 watts, this performs really well. But since I was able to take it up, I figured I'd go ahead and do it for this video. Now, if there's anything else you want to see running on this board, just let me know in the comments below. I wouldn't mind running a different operating system on this. We could throw Steam Deck OS or Chimera OS on this. Just let me know what you want to see. And if you're interested in learning a little more, I'll leave some links in the description. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. And like always, thanks for watching.